This week, we welcome Ankur Chowdhary. He's a security consultant at Bishop Fox. He's going to talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning in cybersecurity. In the second segment, our very own John Snyder. He's the CEO of Agnes Intelligence and Security and Compliance Weekly's new co-host for an introduction to John Snyder himself. In the security news, lots and lots of fun stuff happening this week. None other than Microsoft remote code execution vulnerability dubbed SIG-Red in Windows DNS servers. Zoom addresses vulnerabilities in their vanity URL 0-day. Docker attackers devise a clever but not very new technique to avoid detection. A mass DDoS attack launched against Cloudflare in late June. Critical vulnerabilities can be exploited to hack Cisco small business routers. And that is not the story we covered last week. This is, in fact, a fresh, hot new round of Cisco small business router remote code execution vulnerabilities that are even better or worse, depending on your perspective, than the ones we covered last week. And, of course, I heard there was a major social media network like Twitter that was hacked or something like that. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Are you an enterprise dissatisfied with overpriced analytics software that can't keep up with modern data? If so, then GravWell is the solution for you. GravWell is an unstructured data analytics platform for enterprises who demand total data visibility across their network. GravWell lets your security team go beyond the SIM and fuse data sources to correlate and answer questions you didn't know needed to be asked. Go to gravwell.io/Security Weekly for an unlimited data trial and gain uncompromising visibility today. The biggest problem in security that remains unsolved is flat networks inside the cloud and data center that allow threats to move laterally and compromise vulnerable targets. But microsegmentation using traditional firewalls is too complex and time-consuming. There's a better approach: Edgewise Zero Trust Auto Segmentation. Edgewise is impossibly simple microsegmentation. Using the identity of machines and software that are communicating, Edgewise offers the strongest protection that adapts automatically to changes. Protect any application in any cloud without any changes to your network by visiting securityweekly.com/Edgewise.
Welcome to the show. I'm going to do my best Larry Pesce imitation, which won't be very good, and introduce you to the man who has way, way, way more cigars in his humidor than I do, Mr. Paul Asadorian.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode number 658, recorded July 16th, 2020, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, where there is a gigantic humidor to my right with more cigars than I could ever smoke in my lifetime, probably in that humidor alone. So I need to remember to send Jeff some cigars because I need help smoking them. Of course, I always wish, Jeff, that you were here with me to have cigars in person.
That makes two of us.
Yes.
At least.
Well, it's nice to have you on the show tonight, Jeff, and hopefully someday soon we will be able to share cigars together.
Somewhere, and it looks like it'll be the studio because nothing else is happening.
I feel like we should have created a blog or like a photo montage of all the times at various security conferences we've had cigars together. We probably cobble something together, but it was a lot of pictures, basically. Basically, Jeff and I go get cigars whenever there's a security conference that we're both at.
Yep. There would be quite a few, and darn, we should have thought of that.
Right. Well, maybe moving forward, that's when this COVID
we'll
thing...
We'll start a new tradition. Yeah. Start a new
second
edition on life. Yeah.
That's it. Mr. Lee Neely is here with us, rumored to have Tyler Robinson locked in his basement, but is here undeterred.
Yes, in fact, I think we did lock him up. I got an image of what Pocatello tried to do for a flag the other day. I just couldn't let him live with that.
You got a really big glass of wine there, too, Lee. I love it. What kind of wine is that? Red?
I do believe it's a Tempranillo. Shelley just brought it to me a little bit ago, and I think she's put about a third of a bottle in here.
I'll
make it last.
What is a Tempranillo?
Spanish.
Tempranillo is a Spanish Iberian grape from the Iberian Peninsula. It's often used as a mixture, but some wineries make it straight.
Mm-hmm.
It does well in high heat.
Interesting.
Gives it a long finish.
Nice. Very nice. Let's see. We've got an announcement before we get started. Join the Security Weekly mailing list for our webcast virtual training announcements and receive your personal invite to our Discord server by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe, clicking the button to join the list. Ankur Chowdhary is the PhD candidate at Arizona State University and a security consultant at Bishop Fox, and also our guest for this segment. His research interests include cloud security, software-defined networks, and the application of artificial intelligence and machine learning in the field of cybersecurity. Ankur, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Johnny. Thanks for the introduction, and very excited to be on the show.
Yes, nice to have you. This is Paul. Johnny's is way better looking than I am, so just that helps. It helps. Yes.
It shows up, Johnny. Okay.
No worries. So, Ankur, how did you get your start in information security?
So I got my start, I was very interested in programming from an early age, and the idea of stealing something legal way, like hacking into someone's account, basically getting some information and access to things that you shouldn't have. That was kind of the thrill and excitement of the security that attracted me.
Ankur, what age did you start programming?
I started at the age of 16.
16.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I almost like to encourage the folks start earlier. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's great. Programming introduces a logical way of thinking and problem solving. So programming is basically a code representation of problem solving. So if you're very interested in solving problems at a very early age, I think that's a very good age to introduce young kids to programming.
When did you start getting into the artificial intelligence aspect of computing?
So artificial intelligence aspect of computer security, I found interest in that part at the end of my master's. So I was already interested in cybersecurity as a discipline, and I took a few courses on artificial intelligence, and that got me thinking there can be a lot of applications of artificial intelligence in the field of cybersecurity. And I am a big fan of the movie Terminator. The Skynet was basically an artificial intelligent cyber system. So that was another reason that I was highly interested in applying artificial intelligence in the field of cybersecurity.
And Ankur,
So I had a question.
Go ahead, Lee.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So back in the mid '80s, I took AI, and it was very different. I was wondering, what does a current AI curriculum look like? What are they using for a delivery platform, and what are they teaching you on?
So current AI system has not changed a great deal from '80s. It's the same concepts, but it has with the emergence of new technologies like selfless driving and robotics, it has found a way of being applicable in various areas where it was not that much applicable earlier. So I mean, if I look at the origin of AI, so Alan Turing is considered the father of AI, and the fundamental concepts that were developed during 50s, they evolved into some more advanced techniques, and it started being called AI in, I think, 80s. So the fundamental science or mathematics behind AI has not changed a great deal, I think, but it has just found more applications, and it has started to become more mainstreams with things like Internet of Things or robotics or smart home devices like Alexa.
I thought the artificial intelligence, some of its roots go back to universities like MIT in the early 60s, perhaps. I don't know if they called it, what the exact terminology was, but.
Yeah, at that time, I think it was not called artificial intelligence. So I think artificial intelligence is a fancy name that came up during evolution of these different parts of statistics and mathematics as they evolved into like more sophisticated things like neural networks or deep learning. That's when people thought like artificial intelligence would go very well with this as a discipline.
Yeah, and Ankur, I think that it's a great point to talk about, because we throw these terms around, right? Artificial intelligence or AI, machine learning or ML. You mentioned deep learning in neural networks. If you could attempt to define all of those terms for our audience, because I think we tend to mix them up and use them where it's not appropriate. So I'd love to hear from you and your thoughts on defining those four terms.
I think at core of it, it is statistics. So statistics would be a great way of defining like the backbone that is behind artificial intelligence.
Mm. And so machine learning, deep learning, and neural networks are just different forms of statistics that all fall under the artificial intelligence umbrella?
Yeah, like generally that is the case. Like if you look at different machine learning algorithms, they try to do some kind of pattern recognition or classification, most of which are basically the things that you observe in statistics.
And then what's the difference between neural networks, deep learning, and machine learning?
So the deep learning is basically when you keep on adding more and more layers to your neural network and start to add like some changes in the fundamental structure of your neural network. So if you like add more dense layer to the neural networks and have a horizontal correlation between the layers of neural network, that's when it starts to become deep learning. And like one of the other core difference is that it's more related to the application area. For example, the convolutional neural networks are more applicable to the tasks like image recognition, where a particular type of neural network, which goes up to like 150 layers, is more applicable and fitting. So that's how the discipline of deep learning came into being.
And so what is a neural network for listeners out there? How would you define that?
Neural network is basically a representation of brain. Like if you have a certain set of input sequences, like if you at a fundamental level have a mathematical function y equal to ax plus b. So if you take x as an input and y is output after you apply some linear transformation on that. But it has been found in some of the tasks that our brain processes, like recognition of, say, shape of animal or apple, and basically classification of some of the things or segmentation of those things. Nonlinear function makes more sense, and the nonlinear function is very close to, or it is not very exactly close, but it is understood that the neurons that are present in our brain, they are kind of a nonlinear transformation on input. So basically a neural network takes a series of input, applies some nonlinear transformation on the input data, and uses the output in some task such as classification or segmentation. So that's basically neural network in very basic definition.
Mm. And so your work today is applying these concepts to cybersecurity. Where's the most logical place to start in applying these concepts to cybersecurity? Because, of course, every vendor on the planet is going, oh, we have AI and machine learning and neural networks and all these things. But where's like a really great starting point and a good example of this application?
So one of the places where I would say machine learning has been applied very successfully is spam filtering. Like you don't receive those emails from Nigerian prince asking you to transfer money to their account. these days, because the spam filtering that's been done in your email system, it's very effective. So that is where the AI, machine learning at least, is being applied successfully. But
and Ankur, that's because we've fed a machine learning algorithm, right? These are spam messages because we can read them as humans and go, these are spam messages, right? We've basically trained it, and these are good messages, and now it can tell the difference, right? That's machine learning, and it's supervised, right, at its core.
Yes, that's correct. But next logical area of applying machine learning or artificial intelligence would be in the field of intrusion detection system, where like the current intrusion detection system rely mostly on the signature of attack that is going to happen. So they have identified a set of patterns that are basically indicators of a type of attack, and basically use those indicators to identify good traffic from malicious traffic. But they are limited in the sense that their knowledge is as good as the signature database that is part of those systems. So machine learning can do some kind of pattern recognition and identify some outlying cases of this malicious traffic and try to detect those patterns. So that is one good area of applying machine learning. As for artificial intelligence, in my research in general and in particular, penetration testing is one of the areas where AI can help a great deal. And the reason that I think it will be applicable in near future in penetration testing is because the attack surface is growing quadratically, like number of connected devices you see, like Internet of Things, serverless things, Slack. And last year at DEF CON, somebody performed a query like Alexa query-based SQL injection. So that attack surface is growing quadratically. But number of trained professionals that we have in penetration testing, they are perhaps growing linearly. So we need kind of automation or intelligence that is afforded by artificial intelligence to handle that scale. And I think that is where AI will be very much applicable in the near future.
Now, I agree, but I think we need to clarify, right? Because where a lot of penetration testers, especially John Strand, kind of take issue with this is in the details, right? And I always come back to data on Star Trek, right? Like, we're not saying we're going to build an army of datas from Star Trek to do your pen tests, right? But what we're saying is there's going to be humans that do pen tests, and there's going to be automation that uses AI to help automate the kind of attack process and those breach paths so that you can discover and fix them. But there's also still humans doing penetration testing as well, that it doesn't replace, but it augments those things that the AI technology we have today can be implemented to automate some of those things. It can be automated, correct?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with what you're saying. It can be semi-automated right now. It cannot be fully automated because there are intricate vulnerabilities and semantic information associated with each application that AI system cannot just go ahead and bombard and find out everything. So one particular example that comes to my mind is DARPA Cyber Grand Challenge that happened in 2016. And the team that won that challenge, Mayhem, it's a company from CMU. So what they did differently, to elaborate, the challenge was that 7 different schools participated in a challenge where the goal was to attack the machines of each other and defend their own machine.
I think I watched this video. It was very sensational, like the computing that they had and the teams. Yeah.
Key difference was that there was no human involved. All the machines were AI based. So what Mayhem did differently from others was that it used kind of semi-automation. So it used a technique known as symbolic execution, which basically tells you the vicinity of area where the vulnerability might be located, and fuzzing, which basically hammers that particular area with a lot of payloads to uh, basically exploit that vulnerability. So imagine like if you are blindfolded and there is some technique that is telling you in which direction to go, and the fuzzing acts as kind of a hammer to like break through that stuff. So that is a very practical application of semi-automated use of artificial intelligence that was done successfully.
Yeah, that's a great example. Jeff.
Couple questions. Trying to think of a succinct way to put it. I'm curious. I'm sure the focus of most organizations is on developing AI and ML and looking for applications for it. That all makes sense. Are you aware that are of any people that are either trying to break AI or ML from a hacker perspective, or simply trying to use AI or ML, whatever we're going to call it, in nefarious ways? Trying to figure out ways to use AI ML for real attacks rather than just simulated attacks like pen testing teams.
Yeah, so if I think from attacker's perspective, there is a lot of work that is going on in the field of trying to defeat AI. So one particular kind of attacks are known as model stealing attacks. So basically, if you have a machine learning system that is trying to detect the intrusion attempts, so what I do is I send a large variety of different queries to your machine learning system and learn your model. So now I have the exact representation of how your model will perform with different kind of traffic. And what I'll do is I'll try to send a different variety of traffic to defeat your AI system. So that is one particular example of like how people have been trying to defeat the AI system itself. And there are all defense mechanisms in place as well to basically counter those kind of attempts. So one particular technique is known as moving target defense. So basically, you use different kinds of AI model to basically confuse a malicious entity that is trying to learn your AI model or your AI system.
Yeah, Ankur, could you expand on the moving target defense? What are some applications of that to kind of bring that to life for our audience?
So moving target defense basically emerged from the military or dogfights that were prevalent for pilots. And the core idea is to basically confuse the attacker who is trying to basically attack your system. So some techniques are presenting false view of information or showing like different kinds of valid information. So, for example, if a hacker is trying to map your system, trying to identify what particular services are present in your system, you basically give him the wrong information or wrong view of your network topology or wrong information on the kind of services that are present. So if you have a web server from Apache, you tell him that the web server is from NGNX. So that way, basically, you keep the attacker guessing and basically waste his time and effort in that he would have been using against a static system. So like with the static system, you are basically sitting ducks and you don't have much to counter attacker who is performing reconnaissance. So with moving target defense, you are introducing this dynamic aspect where you are keeping the attacker guessing.
You're basically lying about what artifacts actually exist, correct?
Yes.
Now, do you make a distinction between a legitimate user or legitimate use case versus a potential attack, and then kind of make a decision as to whether or not you're going to lie about it?
Yeah, I think that is one of the important decisions that you have to make so that your business impact is limited. Because if you lie to a legitimate customer or drop a connection request of a legitimate user, then basically you are losing on important business. So you first need to identify like if a user is legitimate versus an attacker, and then take a decision like if you want to just block that traffic attempt or block that malicious connection attempt, or basically you want to mislead the attacker. And another key thing that you gain by misleading attacker is you understand the attack techniques that are being used by them. So instead of a legitimate service, if you direct them to a honeypot, then you can understand like what was the motivation behind this attack. So that way, moving target defense serves dual purpose.
It's interesting, Ankur. It seems like the bad people's AI, right, that's trying to attack systems, and the good people's AI that's trying to defend systems are at odds with each other, right? It's almost like, what was that show where the battle droids kind of like, go at each other? It's like we all have these kind of AI systems that are fighting each other, right? Because we're trying to determine what activity is bad so that basically we could lie to the attackers, and attackers are trying to use AI to figure out where the potential exposures are that are most likely exploitable.
Yeah, you make a very good point. And in research, the moving target defense is considered as a dynamic game between an attacker and defender. And the research questions that cybersecurity researchers are trying to answer is how to come up with optimal defense that basically has a minimum impact on a legitimate user, but does maximum damage for the other player or attacker.
And I have to say, one thing that I've been impressed with in this arena is with the advances in CAPTCHAs, right? In determining whether or not it's a legitimate user or a bot is part of what we're talking about, right? And if I can make that determination accurately, I'm in pretty good shape. But to make that determination, you need a lot of data. And you could pull like what's legitimate user data, right, and feed that in. I think, and they did a sponsored webcast, just full disclosure, but if you look at Google, right, and the number of legitimate user sessions that they can capture is in the billions, right? They've actually taken that, put it into an AI engine to help make that determination. If we can do that as defenders, we've got access to a lot of legitimate, in this case, session data, right, that can help make that determination between legitimate user and bot. And that tends to give us an advantage as defenders, no?
Yeah, that is a very good point and absolutely true. The quality of data that researchers use in designing AI-based cybersecurity system is very critical, because if you consider the domain of cybersecurity, that data has a very big impact on what you will find. So when you do machine learning on top of Amazon dataset, the customer is not trying to mislead you or trying to do some activity that will lead you to bad guesses. But in terms of security system, the attacker will try to mislead you and try to blend in the normal traffic. So if you don't have good quality of data, or like the kind of data that you mentioned from Google, it becomes very hard to identify or make unique and important inferences from your machine learning system.
But that's interesting, Ankur, that just being able to determine when you've got this big glob of data and you want to look at it and say these are legitimate users, right, and therefore I'm going to use this to train my AI. It makes me think, like with Amazon, one of the things that I get very concerned about with making purchases are Are the reviews that people are leaving, are those done by bots? Are those done by humans? And I guess there's another tier there, like, are those done by humans with incentives, right? Is kind of another tier. And how do you differentiate those three? Because at the end of the day, you got to go through your data and determine that. And how do you feed the algorithm based on what you observe, if what you're observing requires analysis to determine whether or not it was a bot or whether it was a human, right? Like the chicken and the egg kind of problem, right?
Yeah, that is true. Like the determination of bots might be a bit trivial, but a determination of paid humans can be tricky at times. Like it's the same kind of thing that you see in terms of fake news, like what kind of news you trust versus what is fake. Similarly, the reviews can also be biased, and like people can pay somebody to make those reviews. But there have been certain kind of machine learning systems that train on the behavior of a normal user. Basically, this check the profile of a particular user and the kind of rating patterns to see if a particular fake user is kind of anomalous to the genuine set of reviews that people who have been reviewing things over a long period of time are providing. So anomaly detection, which is, I would say, related or subfield of machine learning, I would say, can be used to identify those outliers which are trying to blend into normal crowd.
Yeah, no, and I agree, Ankur, right? Like, if you're looking for anomalies, if we focus on the review thing, which you could totally translate to security-related stuff, right? If there's a user and every single one of their reviews is always the same rating, right?
Yes.
That could, one, be a bot. That could also be, I feel like if I'm getting a 10% off coupon code in exchange for leaving a review, like, my motivation as a human is I just want the code. Like, the review doesn't really matter, so all my reviews are 4 stars, right? Maybe they're not 5 stars because I'm afraid of tripping some threshold, but every single one of this person's reviews on this site, every single review is all 4 stars in very similar type language. That's something a computer can recognize a pattern on, right? And I think it's the same thing in security.
Yes, that is true. Like, and that also brings in a lot of ethical issues. Like, if a company is giving people incentive to rate their product or system higher, then do you consider it as a wrong information or some degree of misinformation? That is hard to say. And even for a security system, it will be hard to detect those kind of patterns. Like, if it's a legitimate attacker or if it's a zombie machine, like attacker compromise someone and using them as kind of a pivot to further their attack goals.
Lee, you had some questions.
Oh, I was as I was digesting what you were saying, I'm thinking, you talked about defenses on some of this stuff, and where do you think people are in terms of being able to adequately protect their AI and machine learning from bad inputs, bad learning? Do you think people generally are there, or is something they're not even thinking about yet?
I would say, like, the machine learning and AI system are still in the process of evolving. There is a lot more that needs to be done, not only in terms of the kind of data that we feed, but also the semantic knowledge of the system for which you are designing defense. So each network or each system is different. So if your AI system predicts something as anomalous, but if you understand the semantics of that particular system and a local security policy basically identify that as kind of legitimate traffic, so you need to incorporate some kind of semantic information from the system with the machine learning to make it more effective, or at least proceed towards the direction where it can be useful.
And what do you see? What's the challenge you want to have people handle or look at first? Where should they focus?
So they should focus on having good quality data and also having kind of a semantic understanding of a particular system when they are designing particular defense mechanisms against a particular kind of threat. And it should also be directed towards the application, like if you are trying to prevent distributed denial of service kind of attack, or you are dealing with sophisticated attackers like advanced persistent threats. So categorization of different kind of threats and designing uh, AI system against each particular kind of threat, that would be very useful.
What keeps you awake at night?
That's true. What
Sorry, I
keeps
didn't mean
me
to make
awake?
an unfair question.
What keeps me awake at night is coffee.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what's chewing on the back of your brain that you're saying?
Yeah,
"Dang
but
it,
that's
why
a
can't we
great
solve
that's
this
a
problem?"
great like computer
So-
answer to the question.
so-
Ankur's really a computer.
It sure
What
as
keeps
hell
you awake
is.
at night? That's an answer I would expect from a computer. Coffee.
But if I have
It'd be
to
an
answer
answer
that
I'd give.
properly, within a short duration of time, if I have to do security analysis of a system, and it's a large system, so I'm always wondering, like, did I get the right amount of coverage? What could I have done differently? And that is also one of the motivation that, like, if I can use some kind of automation or autonomy from the side of AI to basically have a broad coverage where when I have a time bound security assessment and I have a lot to cover. So I think, and that's where AI will be very useful in near future.
Ankur, our chat room. Sorry, Jeff, you first.
Well, I wanted to shift gears and ask a more philosophical question, but if you were going to try to pose some of the questions that have popped up on
Well, yeah. So
Discord or YouTube,
let's do
why
it
don't
in
you
that
do
order. Yeah, Discord is really all about your T-shirt, Ankur. I mean, they're just they're very curious, like what your favorite Iron Maiden song is. They're in praise of your T-shirt. It's just great music as well. I'm a huge fan. Love it.
Yeah, my favorite song, like there are so many of their good songs. I would say Dance of Death is my favorite song.
Nice. A lot of people have votes for Run to the Hills, but yeah.
Run to the Hills is a close third, I would say.
There you go.
Hallowed by Name is the second.
There was no hesitation in that. I love that. I love that. So Jeff, philosophical.
So, and it's sort of a two-part question. In the early days of computing, it was said that we shouldn't ever fear computers because computers are never going to advance beyond humans. Certainly they can compute faster, they can calculate faster, but there was an old saying, variations of an old saying, you can only get out of a computer what you put into a computer. In your opinion, has the current state of AI or ML gotten to the point yet where computers are advancing beyond what's been put into them yet?
Mm-hmm.
So there was news about Facebook where it was allegedly said that two systems of Facebook developed their own kind of communication language and they had to be shut down. But later it was found to be an anomaly. So I would say we are very far away from a point where the AI systems would start taking over humans.
Okay, so the second part of the question, Paul brought up Data from Star Trek Next Generation early on in the conversation. There may be more variations, but I think in terms of science fiction folklore, there's sort of three major categories of where computers go. And one is that computers will never really catch up to humans. We're always going to be more advanced than computers.
I can't do that, Dave.
The second sort of philosophy or theory, if you were, is more like, and you can tie it back to movies, more like Terminator or other movies like that, where the machines have figured out that humans are really what's the biggest blight on the world, and so they set out to destroy humankind.
And we destroy the sun to make sure that, anyway, that's the Matrix.
And then the third would be the sort of the data type of future where the computers, have advanced and become somewhat sentient, but they view their role or their purpose in the world is, for lack of a better purpose, advancing humankind, serving.
And so,
humankind.
like the droids in Star Wars, do they fall somewhere between like the Matrix and Terminator and the artificial intelligence in Star Trek? I've been trying to pinpoint where on the scale they fall. They seem to be self-aware, but it's very strangely written, largely because of the space opera, I think, doesn't explore as much. I don't know. I'm very serious. Well, I'm very serious. I'm putting this out to anyone who wants to answer. Like, I'm very serious. Like, I haven't been able to pinpoint where the artificial intelligence is in Star Wars. We could do a whole show on this.
We could do a whole show on this, and maybe we'll invite Ankur.
Yeah, absolutely.
My question is, where do you see the future? Is it door number 1, door number 2, door number 3? Computers never get there. Computers figure out they need to destroy us because we're really what's wrong with the world, or computers will ultimately serve us and be beneficial.
It's a great 3 buckets,
I would
Jeff.
say that the third kind of future is more sensible, where we have smart machines that are helping us. But I hope there is no fourth kind of future where we destroy each other.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
that was it for my question.
But also and this is very like her and Ex Machina, and like what the programmers and the humans, what we put into the artificial intelligence speaks to us. So the biases that we put in, the flaws that we put in, the intelligence that we put in comes from us. Do machines inherit what we put into them, and to what extent do they is their ability to extend that, or are they just a reflection of humans in other philosophical
I would say it's more of a reflection of humans, like the decision that a machine can take in the current state of evolution. It is bound by the state space or the environment that you have configured for that particular machine. So I think it is very much human dependent, like what kind of configuration or environment you configure for a machine.
Agreed. Ankur, we've got 5 silly questions. We just went in some really deep questions just now. These are 5 very silly questions that we ask all of our guests on Security Weekly. Are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
I am.
This is by no means a Turing test or the questions like in other science fiction movies like Blade Runner. But 3 words to describe yourself.
3 words to describe myself. I love rock.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
I would say X, like the one that was there on Friday the 13th. Was it a nail hammer or like? I would say machete. Machete would be a good weapon.
Great movie too. If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
The Great Explorer.
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, do you prefer to go first or second?
I would say second.
Choose 2 celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise?
Hugh Jackman and Julia Roberts.
Very nice. Ankur, thank you very much for appearing on this edition of Paul Security Weekly.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
With that, we'll take a short break, come back with our next guest. Stay tuned.